Welcome back to Pace Immigration, talking once again with immigration lawyer Andy Semichuk. Andy, hot off the press, a new announcement, and it seems like there's a new announcement every week from the Canadian government when it comes to immigration. This time it looks like a freeze on sponsoring parents and grandparents to come into the country. What does it all mean?
Well, they have this tremendous backlog. I think it's 165,000 cases that are backlogged up to 7 years. So right now in Canada, it's virtually impossible to sponsor a parent or a grandparent to come to Canada. And the processing backlog has to be cleaned up, and something had to be done. So what they did is they announced this freeze. But along with the freeze, they also announced this, some call it a super visa, for parents and grandparents so that they can come to Canada as visitors while this is all sort of being cleaned up. So they've softened the blow a bit. But let me tell you a story about that kind of cleans things or puts things into perspective.
Okay, go for it.
I had a client who sponsored some parents, a Canadian who was sponsoring some parents from the United States. Well, after a year of waiting, nothing was happening. So she said, or they agreed basically, the parents should come up to Canada and as visitors and then wait for the result. And so they came up to Canada. They had a few hardships at the border, but eventually they came up to Canada. And shortly after that, about 6 months or so later, the mother started showing severe signs of Alzheimer's and ended up in a nursing home. And they got caught in this limbo. They could, the sponsorship is waiting 5 or whatever years, for it to be processed. In the meantime, these people are in Canada, and they can neither stay nor go. And the immigration office is fighting their stay, and on the other hand, they have nothing back to go, to go back to, and they're sort of up in the air.
Well, you mentioned Alzheimer's there. I mean, I heard that in this latest announcement that there's also some stipulations on health care and whether or not a family can support the parents. How does that all break down?
Well, that's the key to it. I mean, if they could just, what's the big worry about bringing parents or grandparents here? That they might get sick and end up as undue burdens on our healthcare system. If we can look after that big problem, that one issue, then the rest of it is pretty simple. I don't think there would be anybody who would be very upset about having parents here. So the idea is that they have to have medical insurance. They have to be able to cover the costs of health care so that they don't become an undue burden. And if they can do that, then they can get this visitor's visa for 2 years. And I assume it'll be renewable in 2-year increments until such time as the sponsorship papers can come through. So that's a way of handling the problem. But there are other issues, such as not all parents and grandparents are in the same boat. Let's say a single mother who's lost the father is more in need of the company of their children here in Canada than someone whose both parents are alive and who have other siblings that are still overseas. So there should be some prioritization about who comes to Canada, even in the context of the super visa and the way they're doing things now.
I mean, Canada's doing extraordinarily well right now economically and I guess socially and any other way, so much so that a lot of people are banging on the door to get in. Do you see really anything that's going to actually alleviate the backlog completely?
Not in the short run, and basically what they have to do is try and sort of match up the need with the availability. And the availability, like there's millions, hundreds of millions of people who want to come to Canada, so there'll never be a matchup. So it's always going to be our controlling how many people come into Canada versus this tremendous demand for spots to come into Canada. And that's what governments are all about, policy and setting things up the right way. In this case, with parents and grandparents, I think they need to prioritize who can come. Singles, for example, as I mentioned, widows or people who have most of their family here and nobody overseas should have a higher priority than people who have family overseas. And then make it possible for these people to come as visitors, albeit with medical insurance to cover the problems that may arise medically. That seems to me to be a pretty reasonable resolution to a difficult problem.
Okay. There you go. Andy Semichuk, paceimmigration.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye.